Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Painted Arrow podcast. We have a very special guest with us today, Jordan Hoover. He is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan as we speak here. We're in the Lower Peninsula, and for a lot of you guys who may have listened to the last few podcasts that we have put out, you maybe seen some of the reels and different posts that we've put out on our social media platforms. We've been talking a lot about the state of Michigan and some of the big regulation changes that are up for a potential change this year. A lot of things are happening, and that is how we met Jordan. Jordan reached out after seeing and hearing some of the different things we've put out, and we were connected by some mutual friends. And I think Devin and I are, that's who's here, by the way, with me. Devin Cole's here next to me. Mm-hmm. And I think we're both looking forward to learning some things too, because we are not from the Upper Peninsula. I've never hunted deer in the Upper Peninsula. And Jordan has. I believe you've lived there your entire life, and I want to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself. And also, will you just mention everything when I hand it over to you, Jordan, how you're a part of the Upper Peninsula Deer Advisory Team, what that means, how long you've been a part of it, etc. We'll toss it over to you, Jordan. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for having me today, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion. As you mentioned, I do live here in the Upper Peninsula, the Northwest End, about 6 miles out of Lance in Farragut County, which those that aren't familiar with our geography up here, pretty much right at the base of the Keweenaw Peninsula. Spent most of my life up here. However, full disclosure, I was born a troll in Lower Michigan. So I spent some of my early childhood years down in Livingston County in the Pinckney area, and then my family moved north to Calumet, and God's country's been home pretty much ever since. When it comes to the Deer Advisory Team, I have the honor and privilege of serving as chairman of the Upper Peninsula Deer Advisory Team. I've been in that role the last 2 years. And prior to that, I served on the original DMI, or Deer Management Initiative. And I've been doing this kind of work for, I think this is year 11 now, of natural resources advocacy work, primarily pertaining to deer. I've done most of that largely as an independent, not an affiliate with any of the groups or clubs.
Got you. What year did you say that you moved to the Upper Peninsula? What year was that?
Would have been 97, I believe.
Was that kind of like I know based on where you are and based on where Pinckney is, like that, the change of scenery is quite different. Like, was that kind of a shock to you for a little while?
It wasn't, because even though I was born in the Lower Peninsula, my family's always had strong ties here. My family for generations has come north and backcountry bow hunted in the Iron County region since long before I was born. So I grew up with the men in my family heading off to bow camp every fall in the Great Northwest UP Wilds. And when I turned 12, I was included in camp and began to experience all the wonders that the UP has to offer at the age of 12. So it was a pretty natural transition, and it was just what home was always meant to be.
Yeah. For somebody who's listening, I mean, we have a lot of folks that are from out of state that listen in. If somebody's never been to Michigan, like they don't even have the first idea, can you, I guess, explain the vast difference, other than the fact that it's connected by a bridge, like the difference between the Upper and Lower Peninsula as it pertains to deer and just general living? Like, can you give a little bit of a background?
Sure. Well, it's a really worn out phrase, but it fits. There's a tale of two peninsulas in the state of Michigan. And, the Lower Peninsula, obviously in the southeast, you have some really urban environments. You get a little north of that and you start to see the farms appear and things of that nature, and there's sporadic woodlots. Then you drive north, you hit that mid-Michigan mark, and things change a little bit. There's a few more farms, there's a little more timber, there's not so much urban sprawl. And I think that kind of continues to thin out the further north you go, the northern lower is its own animal itself, not so populated as the southern lower peninsula. But then you cross the mighty Mackinac Bridge, and it is like you just walked into Alaska. The two are not comparable in any way, shape, or form as far as their aesthetics. And there is a truly old, rugged beauty that prevails here in the Upper Peninsula with the boreal forests and things of that nature. You know, lakes you can see 20 feet right to the bottom, crystal clear waters, beautiful, clean air. It's an amazing place to be. It's a blessing to live here. And the Upper Peninsula does certainly have some agricultural influence down in the southern central portion, you know, the Menominee, Garden, Delta area. But certainly nowhere near the amount of agriculture that you would see, for example, in the thumb of Michigan. A lot of small towns, a lot of family-owned businesses, things of that nature, nowhere near the population of Lower Michigan. Matter of fact, the Upper Peninsula is 3% of the total population of the state of Michigan, if that gives our listeners any perspective. But as you go from east to west, even within the Upper Peninsula, things begin to change even more. You'll see a transition from more hardwoods into a lot of cedar and hemlock and birch and rock. We got a lot of rock in the west end of the UP. Two major population centers would be Marquette, Houghton, and Escanaba, to some extent Iron Mountain. But outside of that, it's a lot of really small, proud hometowns with working class folks.
That was wonderfully done.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we get that. It's like, it's almost like down here, we don't, when we are referring to deer hunting, you know, we kind of leave out the Upper Peninsula. Like we don't even really include it because it is, again, it's a different animal. And so that's when we get into this interesting conversation around deer hunting regulation. And I guess if you would, what are some of the complexities? Because you've been doing this for a lot longer. I mean, it's hard for us to even say that we're really involved in any of this current regulation change. We're very interested in it and we've made our voices known, but like we aren't truly like in the nitty gritty, having the conversations behind closed doors, know the people, know the key individuals on the committees. Like as it pertains to deer management in the state of Michigan, what are some of the complexities and challenges when it comes to looking at both the Lower and the Upper Peninsula as a whole?
Well, certainly, you know, when you're considering statewide regulations, you're always going to get a lot of pushback, right? Because Michigan is such a tremendously diverse state, even within our respective peninsulas. And then you add a whole nother peninsula on top of it with all of its complexity and diversity. And it can be difficult, right? And hunters always want to see things managed effectively through the lens which they view it. We're all guilty of that to some extent, right? Our best view of the world is our own backyard, as they say. And sometimes it's harder to look at a broader perspective across the state, even zone to zone, between zones 2 and 3, for example. The issues are not necessarily the same. You know, I've been to areas in zone 3 that they're knocking on deer densities of 200 deer per square mile, which is unfathomable to a Uper, right? Mm-hmm. Then you get into the tip of the mitt, the Northwest 13, and you know, you talk to some guys down there, they're seeing the lower doe numbers, they're a little bit concerned. So when you start diving into deer regulations, it can be a very complex, very passionate discussion very quickly.
Yeah. What are some of the things, I guess, to your point, like what are some of the things in the Upper Peninsula that you guys are seeing currently? Your observation, or some of the things that are, I guess, are quote unquote touchy subjects, things that are highly debated, or, I mean, I don't have my pulse on the finger in the Upper Peninsula. So like, what are some of the current issues that, you know, deer hunters are looking at?
Well, obviously here, especially in the northern tier of the Upper Peninsula, we simply don't have the deer densities that other areas of the state of Michigan do. And, anytime you're talking to people about the Upper Peninsula, the W word always manages to emerge fairly early in the discussion: wolves. And the prevailing narrative that often comes out of the UP is that the wolves ate all the deer and there's nothing left. Unfortunately, it's a bit of an intellectually dishonest statement. We certainly do have more than our fair share of wolves. They've exceeded the federal recovery metrics, all those sorts of things. And they are a factor. They are a piece of the puzzle up here for us. Wolf depredation claims 20 to 25,000 deer a year, roughly. So they're certainly on the radar as far as the UP deer management issue. But unfortunately, at this juncture, it's a federal matter, and until they're returned to the state's management control, there's just simply not a lot that we can really do about that. But I would encourage folks listening to this to understand that when you come to the Upper Peninsula, there's not a wolf behind every tree, right? Like, they're not picking off kids at the bus stop kind of thing. It's not like that. There are wolves out there, and there's plenty of them. But the driver for deer abundance in the Upper Peninsula really comes down to habitat condition and winter severity. And we've got a real habitat crisis on our hands up here with the deer winter complexes, or DWCs. Some people call them deer yards. Our deer up here will migrate away from some of the higher snowfall zones down to these wintering areas. And over the last 30 years especially, we've seen just a tremendous decline in the number of and size of some of these DWCs. A short 100 years ago, we had something on the order of like 136 uniquely identified deer winter complexes. Today, there's 36 remaining. And of the 36 that are left, only 6 of them are meeting the DNR's metrics for providing sufficient food and cover for white-tailed deer to survive the winter. So we have a really big issue, when you're talking about cramming 100% of the UP deer population into roughly 25% of the habitat for several months on end without sufficient food and cover, it becomes a problem. And cedar and hemlock they're such slow-growing trees that reforestation efforts, DWC repair and stabilization efforts are going to take a substantial amount of time. Those efforts will exceed my lifetime before there's truly meaningful repair and change. But ultimately, that's kind of the hard truth up here, is that our deer winter complexes are the carrying capacity for our UP deer herd. And due to that habitat degradation, our carrying capacity is arguably lower than it's ever been. So it's difficult.
Jordan, can you explain these DWCs a little further? Like, what? Like, I know next to nothing about those or that, and so can you explain for the listener like what that is and what constitutes a DWC? Like you mentioned, there used to be X number, and now there's less than 40. It sounded like you said. Can you kind of
36?
So is that? Like, is it on public land? Do private landowners like offer up a portion of their property to be a DWC? Like, can you explain the DWCs a little further?
So when we're speaking about a deer wintering complex, what we're referencing is a historical area of whitetail winter range. So our whitetails will have a summer and a winter range that's very well defined here. And especially in the high snowfall zone, it is embedded in their genetic coding, if you will, that they understand they have to leave the high snowfall zone when the big snow comes, that second week in November, thereabouts, or they'll all die. There's simply nothing to sustain them in the high country. They have to migrate down, and, the migratory distances vary depending on the proximity of the summer range to their closest winter range. but we've seen migratory distances of as much as 50 miles, and that's the extreme end. Deer winter complexes are primarily characterized by large stands of old-growth cedar and hemlock, and to a lesser extent, things like white pine and things of that nature, but coniferous trees.
Sure.
The reason for that is it creates a weather shield for them of sorts. It'll be significantly warmer within those stands of trees. Obviously, it serves as a wind block, but mostly it mitigates snow depth. Those trees are large, they're bushy, and the deer aren't up to their bellies in snow when they're in those large stands of old-growth cedar. They can navigate, they can move around, and then there's winter forage available for them in those areas that simply wouldn't be there in the hardwoods. So really, it is a embedded survival mechanism for our deer to migrate and spend those winter months in the DWCs.
So what is driving the drastic decline in DWCs? Like you said there was over 100 and now there's 36. So like,
yeah, is there like a solution to, like, is there a magic silver bullet here that like creates more DWCs?
So the state of Michigan only owns roughly 10% of the land mass that are classified as deer winter complexes. The remaining 90% is held by private industrial landowners that are timber companies. And that kind of becomes the collision point, right? The timber companies make their living, put bread on their table, and keep the lights on by doing what? By cutting trees. And cedar can be quite valuable in particular. So you can see the problem.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge anyone the fruits of their labor, and I'm a firm believer in private property rights, all those kinds of things. But it becomes a slippery slope when you have someone who owns thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of vital habitat, and they're doing things that are potentially negatively impacting the future of an entire resource across the peninsula. I think at that point, there has to be some conversation.
That's wild, because down here, one of the key ways to really encourage and increase deer habitat is to cut trees.
Mm-hmm.
More sunlight to the forest floor, more regen, et cetera, which is wild to hear that that's almost the opposite there because of the snowfall, the drastic accumulation of snowfall.
Yeah, I mean, already just hearing, the few things you've talked about, like I'm sitting here like, man, this is it's almost hard problems, to it's almost hard to comprehend because it couldn't be more different. Like it's not even something you hear about down here. So I guess like to use that as maybe a potential segue when we start to talk about, regulation change and some of the things that are being talked about and are potentially up for vote this year, like maybe try to walk the listener through some of that through the lens of somebody from the UP and things you agree with and disagree with, and don't agree with, and just maybe let's start down that path.
Yeah, but you asked me, for a solution. Right now, I don't have one to offer you, unfortunately. There are some programs available through the Department of Natural Resources, such as DRIP funding. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
DRIP, like DRIP, DRIP?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so $1.50 out of every hunting license that is sold goes into DRIP funding, and DRIP is an acronym for Deer Range Improvement Program. So that is a match funding grant system. So, for example, you say you were the president of the Deer Association of Michigan, and you said, "Hey, Michigan DNR, we'd like to kick in $15,000." And have you match fund $15,000 from the DRIP funding, and we want to go plant, whatever, a bunch of oaks and some cedars. Well, that's how that works. And those funds are available on a yearly basis across the state of Michigan. And in the UP, unfortunately, the scale of the damage just simply can't be mitigated by the available funding and the available volunteers to do the work. in rough numbers, you're looking at basically $1,000 per acre to do deer winter complex restoration. And part of the reason that it's so costly is that the survival rate of these cedars when you plant them is about 1 in 3. And you have to cage them. They put protective, fencing or whatever have you, pipe around them sometimes. And the reasoning for that is that if you don't, the deer will simply browse them off. There won't be any. Mm. So it takes a very sustained effort, and it's very expensive to do. And in the context of the entirety of the Upper Peninsula, I think the rough napkin math I did comes out to in excess of $800 million if we were to do everything that needs to be done. That's the scale of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then you need hunters and conservationists and people who care to actually do the planting. Like, that's not easy work. I mean, that's planting and then caging trees to the tune of millions and millions. Like, that's a huge buy-in too. That's almost unrealistic.
Yeah, it's demoralizing for sure, and that's why I said earlier in our discussion on this topic that this is an issue and a project that will well exceed my lifetime.
I hate to digress because I do want to continue down the regulation and what's kind of going on right now, time frame. But like you mentioned wolves, and I can't remember, it's 20 to 25%. You mentioned of basically the depredation that they're causing. Do you have any idea that number for black bear? Because it's got to be similar.
So that is a hotly debated topic. There are individuals that would adamantly disagree that black bears are contributing to deer mortality in a meaningful way. I am not in that camp. I personally regard black bears as a fawn vacuum. They're an opportunistic predator. Certainly they eat all kinds of things. They're an omnivore. But many creatures in the wild, including the black bear, understand where their easiest food sources are certain times of the year. And when fawns are being born, that is certainly buffet time for a UP black bear.
Right.
And we have a record and rising black bear population up here. They are flourishing in unbelievable fashion. And, some of the napkin math that I've seen before suggests that one black bear will eat 3 to 4 fawns each spring.
Yeah.
Well, if you multiply that by, and the numbers exceeded that now, but we'll just use 10,000 black bears that are adults as an example. I mean, rough numbers, you're talking about 35,000.
That's insane.
I think that's on the high end, but nonetheless, let's say it was 18,000. That's still a lot.
Yeah. Everything that I've ever read about black bears, it says exactly what you just stated. Like they know how to basically capitalize on springtime fawn season, like that's what everything I've ever read about black bears is they kill staggeringly high populations of whitetails. But I guess I'm just proving the point in my mind, and you're proving it in a way. Like, you guys got some big challenges. So does it almost feel like some of the big initiatives, and I might have you talk about it because you're closer to it than we are. Like, what are some of the initiatives that are currently up for a vote, up for discussion, up for a potential change this year? And then the follow-up question to that is does a lot of what's up for a change feel irrelevant based on all the things you've just told us that the challenges you have in the UP? Does it feel completely like it's not really driving any change up there?
So I guess we'll just dive in with the first one, right? We'll have to come back to it because it's worthy of its own conversation. But the deer advisory team extensively worked on a buck regulation this year. We knew after the reg cycle last year that we wanted to dive into the meat of talking buck regs this year. It was already pretty much cast in stone that that's the direction we were going to head. And after months and months and months of cross collaboration between the UP and the LP advisory teams, we eventually settled on recommending that the entire state move to a $1 system. I do think that there's a lot of merit to that in both peninsulas, but for differing reasons, perhaps. As I said earlier, anytime you start air quotes broad brush regulations, people can get a little upset. But our team gave a lot of consideration to this recommendation, and we think it will help in both peninsulas to address peninsula-specific issues, even though the recommendation is broad brush, air quotes. In the context of the UP, we have had a very poor antlerless harvest culture up here for a long time. I call it the holy doe complex. There are a lot of the old guard that have been adamantly against the harvest of does for any reason for a very long time. In fact, in the high snowfall zone here where I reside, you could not take an antlerless deer, period, for the last 10 years. We got that regulation reversed this last spring, and you are now allowed to harvest does with archery tackle only, which is the way it was for a very long time prior. But that 10-year stint of not being able to harvest any does whatsoever really put us in a bad place. The sex ratio imbalance has become stuff that people can't fathom when you talk to them about it. I'm very comfortable telling you that a UP-wide average buck-to-doe ratio is probably 12-1. Staggering.
Wait, 12 bucks to one doe?
12 does to $1.
Oh, got it. I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say. I was thinking that and said the opposite.
Jordan, can I back up just 1 second? So can you, we didn't do a good job of like getting your background at any level at early on here, but like when you are referencing Deer Advisory Committee, Upper Peninsula versus Lower Peninsula, like, can you just give us the quick definition there, a quick like update on what is the Deer Advisory Committee? How is that different from, or maybe it's the same thing as the DMI that everybody heard about kind of last time, and how long ago you got involved and why you got involved? I mean, I'm sure that's a loaded question, but just trying to like kind of set the stage a little bit here.
So, as I said in our intro portion, this is stuff that I've been doing on an individual level as an independent for more than a decade. But 3 years ago, I had the privilege of getting involved as a member of the DMI, which was the Deer Management Initiative. Mm-hmm. And that was a group that fall under the direction and purview of the Natural Resources Commission. They essentially recognized that there were issues in the state of Michigan that were failing to address, and that there was significant displeasure on behalf of the sportsmen. And the DMI was put together with a eye towards soliciting public feedback to help solve those issues. And they did a pretty good job as far as selecting individuals to serve on these committees. I mean, you have your classic stakeholder group representatives, like Mike Kettlar from the Michigan NDA. You got Bob Jones from Michigan Bow Hunters. Up here, you've got Mike Taylor from UP Whitetails. You've got Gary Gorniak from Straits Area Sportsman's Club. So there were, air quotes, group representatives that were there. But they also went to great length to select an equal number of independent, unaffiliated Michigan outdoorsmen as well, that weren't necessarily tied to a conservation or a sporting organization. And you had representation of all kinds. I mean, we had people that were teachers in a public school. We had people that were minors. We had people that were retired. We had people that were executives, people from the timber industry, people from agriculture. So it was a really well-rounded group. I won't drag you guys through all the horror of the DMI. I think everybody in the state of Michigan knows pretty much how that ended, and it was bad. The DMI worked for over a year to bring a comprehensive list of recommendations before the commission, and the commission did not implement a single one of those recommendations. And after that, people were pretty upset that served on that team, and rightfully so. They'd invested heart and soul and time and money into the process. And it was a big loss to come away with not even one change resulting from all of our work. But myself and others, we went to the DNR and we said, hey, listen, it would be a shame to waste this, because we all went through an exhaustive biological, ecological education. The department did a really good job of bringing in experts, not only in state but out of state, to speak to us and educate us on all kinds of topics, from forestry to fawn fecundancy rates, to hardwood regeneration. Everything you could imagine that relates to deer, they threw it at us. And we really felt that, there's historical precedent for advisory teams. And a lot of our listeners might not know this, but throughout time, there has been deer advisory teams before us. And they kind of pop up on the radar. They're there a couple of years, and then they're gone. And, my perspective is the white-tailed deer is the flagship species of the state of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
It's worthy of keeping and maintaining an advisory team for one of arguably our most valuable and precious resources. And that was how I presented it to the department. And they were in agreement. So the DNR picked up the ball, and they rebranded the DMI the DAT, or Deer Advisory Team. And anyone who wanted to return from the DMI was welcome to do so. Most did. We got a couple of new faces, and we went right back to work year 2 with the DNR under the banner of the DAT. And this would be the second year of that for 2026.
Beautiful. That was helpful. I learned a lot
excellent.
right there. So two things. One, the first question I want to ask is, you mentioned twice now that you've been involved at sort of a personal or independent level for nearly a decade before you chose to get involved in, the DMI and now the DAT. So my question is sort of a personal one for you. Like, what drove that interest? Like, why were you so, why'd you feel so called to be involved, for the white-tailed deer, and why was it something you were interested in?
Well, that's a 2-part answer, and I'll start with the more lengthy and more interesting portion.
Sure.
So I was a born and raised Michigan boy, and I grew up in an outdoor family. My father, my uncles, aunts, grandfathers. It was a generational thing in my family. We hunt, we fish, we trap, we hike, we snowshoe, we do these things. And for us, it wasn't simple recreation. Going to deer camp wasn't an excuse to, get away from the old lady and crack a beer. It was part of the fabric and the fiber of our family and our values and the way that we very consciously chose to live our lives. And there's something deeply wholesome and spiritual almost about knowing where your food comes from.
Sure.
Amen.
About growing your own food. And, the journey that a young man or a young woman even goes through developing as a person. You learn so much about yourself in the outdoors when you're tested, when your limits are pushed, when you have to be creative, when you have to overcome adversity. The outdoors is a tremendous thing to develop you as a human being. And my family always saw deep value in those things and instilled those values in me as a boy. So I grew up with this. It was part of my DNA. And as I got into my early teen years, my father had always been active, with sportsmen's clubs and things like that. He shot competitive archery, as did I as a boy. But in my early teen years, I saw an urgency develop in my father that I couldn't explain. And he began to get involved very high level with policy work through Michigan United Conservation Clubs, specifically related to deer, and specifically our UP deer herd. And it made a big impression on me. I would walk by his study. It'd be 11 o'clock at night, and the desk light would be on, and there he was, with his glasses halfway down his nose, and he's looking at all these charts and graphs and spreadsheets, just immersed in the data, making phone calls all the time. He would drive, on his dime from our home at the time in Calumet all the way down to Lansing for policy discussions, to meet with legislators, to speak to the commission. And it was something that always stuck with him, bear down on that and fight the good fight. And at that point in life, as a teenager, obviously, I had other priorities, and deer advocacy wasn't even on my radar. But as I grew, as I matured, as I came to have my own family, your perspective starts to shift. You start to reevaluate the things that are most important and what matters most. Mm. And what troubled me was when I would listen to other hunters. They were talking about the same problems that my father had been talking about 20 years ago. Nothing had changed. And, I hunt a little differently than a lot of folks do. And I'm not saying there's not others like me, but I think the vast majority up here tend to go to, a piece of property or routinely frequent the spot, on state land, whatever the case may be. Set up the box blind or the hub blind and pour out the carrots and dutifully guard them. And that's not the way I go about things. I cover 3, 4, sometimes 5 counties a year and put on thousands of miles, the truck, the ATV. I wear out 2 pairs of boots, and we do backcountry camp. So as a result, my perspective is very different. But what I began to see troubled me more and more. And I started to go to some of the meetings, the sportsmen's clubs or the stakeholder group meetings, and I started to ask questions. And nobody had any answers. And a lot of the old heads were rather grumpy that some, air quotes, young, dumb kid was showing up questioning them. I knew that at that point, if there was ever going to be change, it wasn't going to come through the established channels. So I set out to do what I could. And I began to talk to legislators. I began to talk to biologists within the DNR. I began to go to commission meetings and, educate myself about the process on a higher level. But really, my why do I do it? I have 4 sons at home. My oldest is 16. My youngest is 10. And the realization came to me one day that if I didn't engage, that if I didn't do everything I could, my sons would never know the UP wilds that I did. It would be gone forever. And I wasn't willing to live with that. So that's what gets me up in the morning and keeps me grinding and keeping me doing what I'm doing. The family legacy and just the desire to ensure a fantastic, beautiful, wonderful outdoor experience for my children and for everyone else's children who are entitled to the same.
That was beautiful.
I can't help but to resonate with how you describe it's the fabric and the DNA of who you are and how you were raised, and that is, I think I speak for Devin and I both, but that is so in line with how we are trying to raise our kids too. We couldn't be living more different lives from where we're living to where you're living. It's different. Like you said, it's like Alaska up there. But at the same point, that is truly, there's so much value in the resources that we have, the natural resource, the white-tailed deer, being able to grow a garden, understanding how to process an animal. There's so much value. Trapping, understanding where the fur on your coat is coming from. It couldn't
Amen.
be more valuable. So I guess I completely agree with that. But secondly, we talked about this on the last podcast. Like, there's really, I said the word civil responsibility, but it's like if hunters understand that there's truly nobody out there other than other hunters that are representing hunters, I mean, you have to get involved. If it's something that's important to you, like, you have a civil responsibility and a duty to yourself and your family and the next generation to be involved at some level, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If you're not, like, no one's representing you, but there are other places. The insurance companies is an easy one that we discussed, but like, there is legitimate paid representation on other behalf. Like, if we don't do it as a hunting body, no one else is going to do it.
Well, my old man used to say it this way when I was young. He always taught me that stewardship is an action word. And, as I aged, as I became older, I came to understand that stewardship isn't limited to the woods and the waters. That there's I hate to say it this way, there's a darker side, right? Mm-hmm. It's advocacy and policy. It's engaging with elected officials. It's engaging with the bureaucracies. It's going to the meetings. It's working on policy and regulations. It's not fun. It's not sexy, right? Mm-hmm. It's work. And, I think a lot of hunters, and I don't want to cast shade here, but we want all the liberty and all the freedom and all the enjoyment, but we're not shouldering our share of the responsibility of stewardship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jordan, to be honest with you, like, Nate and I are the first ones to stand up and put our hand up in the air and say that we're not the most educated on things related to regulation change and that kind of thing. But I think the thing that we both share is like he mentioned, the feeling of responsibility to get involved and to become informed. We are owners of an archery company in this space, and it's, to an extent, we felt like, look, we need to become educated on how this stuff happens and what this process looks like. And I think, when we put out the little bit of content that we have, the call to action for us has been the focus. Like, regardless of what it is that you agree with or believe, the call to action is to get involved. If you have an opinion, go to the NRC meeting, show up. The amount of people that are the keyboard biologists, so to speak. Like, I think the call to action is to get involved. And if you have an opinion, you should go and see how the process works and to watch that play out. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, is to educate ourselves.
And to that point, if I may, if you get involved, you are going to learn something, because the very little that you and I, Dev, have gotten involved. I mean, this whole podcast is like very informational. I mean, you're going to become sharper and understand what's really going on if you show up to these things and try and get involved. But you were going to say something, Jordan, and I cut you off.
Oh no, my hat is off to you guys. I've watched you guys just in this last little while kind of plant your front foot and go, yeah, we need to go in this direction. And I love it. There's nothing that makes me happier than seeing the next generation of leaders start stepping up and assuming their rightful place. Because I'll tell you what, I'm 43 years old. I'm not going to die tomorrow, but I'm not a spring chicken either. And when I go to a lot of these events and meetings and things like this over the years, I am the youngest face in the room at 43 years old by 20 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There is nobody. And we've got to change that. We've got to change that. And, I encourage people, whether or not you share my personal views and my beliefs or what I think is a good regulation, I don't care. I still want you to stand up and speak up and be heard and engage. You don't have to agree with me. That's not a prerequisite. Mm-hmm. Exercise your right. Be a good steward. Advocate for the things that you believe in, no matter what that may be.
I will say, so I'm more saying this for everybody that may be listening, not as much necessarily you, Jordan, but we make we make magnetic filming products for hunters. That's what we do. That's what Painted Arrow does. That's our mission. And we continue to innovate products. We have a large percentage of the people that use and follow the brand are younger hunters. And I don't think there is the other thing I'll add on to that too is we travel quite a bit. I mean, the last 3 to 4 years, we've traveled many, many, many zip codes across the country and have had conversations with everybody. I mean, you fill in the blank, like old, young. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had tons of conversations, different states, people who have opinions, talking regulations. Like, we've heard a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't think by going to a trade show and selling product maybe that you would learn about what's going on in terms of politics in Kansas and Iowa and Ohio, but like you do, like you really, really, really do. There's so much time to have conversation, and like we've learned a ton about, I guess, the younger hunter. And I want to say that I think the younger hunter is a passionate hunter. I do think that, to your point, there's a lack of involvement in policy and politics, because I think what goes, like, I'm just picturing like myself, like COVID was like a big thing for a lot of people, and like just everything that's going on in politics right now, it's really, I'm one of them. I was there where I'm like kind of like withdrawing from politics because it's got such a bad view in this media and digital age. And so I think like it's hard to, for the younger people, like it's hard to blame them for not wanting to get involved in politics, but like it is very much still that younger generation, the people that I've talked a lot with, that Devin's talked a lot with, the people are very passionate. I think there's just a little bit of a scare when you think about going somewhere and talking to people who are a part of different committees and boards. It's like there's like this hesitation.
Yeah, but for me, the difference, and Jordan, I share this sentiment with you. The difference for me, I've got 3 little boys at home, and the difference for me was the realization that, like, if I don't get educated and I don't get involved, and likewise the people my age don't get educated and get involved, the same opportunities that I've had growing up and all of the fondest memories of my life that I've made that have been in the woods, my boys might not have that same opportunity. That's when it became apparent and personal, to the level where it was like, this is a duty.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I owe it to them to understand and to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, I was blessed to grow up with the family that I did, and have the mentoring that I did, and understand a lot of these things that aren't necessarily prerequisite for a lot of other folks. So I don't fault anyone. I don't look down at my nose and say, well, Michigan sportsmen suck. But I do recognize that the need to educate Michigan sportsmen on when, where, how, and who to engage is immense. Mm-hmm. And for the last 3 years, I've been on basically nothing short of an educational campaign. I travel to sportsmen's clubs in different places, and I just talk about deer. And I listen to people's hunting stories. I listen to the concerns, and I help teach them how to engage. I mean, even just last year, I went to a sportsman's club meeting, and there was a gentleman. He stopped me mid-speech, and he says, "You keep talking about the NRC. You mean the DNR?" I said, no, sir. They're not the same. Mm-hmm. And that might seem staggering to some people, but there are plenty of people out there that just don't understand the process, mm-hmm. and the entities and agencies involved, and how the gears turn. And we have to certainly do a better job of getting that information out there, making it available for the public, making it easy to understand. And, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say this. In the last 3 years, I've seen a change in Michigan. I've seen people start to engage, to start to sink their teeth in things, to start to ask questions, guys that weren't before. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing the young guys coming on strong, and I'm encouraged by that. I really am. And I think that right now in the state of Michigan is a pivotal moment. And going into these regulatory meetings that we're going to have with the commission in April and May, Michigan's in a position where we can make history, and our hand holds the pen that writes our story.
You're giving me goosebumps over here. Tell me more. I mean, what's going on right now? For anybody who's like it's hard to bring everybody up to speed from scratch, but like, what specifically are you referring to there?
So first and foremost, in all the years that I've been doing this work, which is over a decade, I have never, ever seen the level of engagement and participation that I am seeing right now. So right off the top, that alone is something special. This is history in the making. Michigan hunters are waking up. They're getting up off the couch. They're not just, making snide comments behind a keyboard. They're asking questions. They're calling biologists. They're emailing commissioners. They're figuring out when and where the commission meetings are going to be. That's never happened in the 11 years I've been doing this. I go to a commission meeting and a good turnout might be 40 or 50 people. That's a good one. That's sad. And then you consider that 8 or 10 of those people are anti-hunters. We're turning a corner here with engagement, and there is nowhere to go but up from here with that. But as far as the regulations go, I hate to use broad brush descriptors when it comes to age demographics, but unfortunately, there is a very real divide in the age demographics between how we hunt and how we want to manage deer as the next generation versus how our forefathers did. And I think that a lot of the younger guys coming up, and I'll include myself in that bracket, I'll say 50 and under, just for conversation's sake. Mm-hmm. Somebody out there is going to get mad and they'll say, well, I'm 52 and I agree. Well, I get it.
Yep.
I'm just taking a shot at it here. I think that we are much more scientifically engaged, much more biologically engaged. And I think that the next generation of hunters will be a resurgence of a conservationist mindset like we've never seen in Michigan in decades, because we're concerned about the future. We're not just concerned for going out to the woods and what can I take? What can I get from this? We're thinking about tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We're thinking about our kids. We're thinking about our grandkids. And I'll just use all the land management stuff. Look at how much the land management industry has exploded.
Yeah.
That alone is an indicator to you of a stewardship mindset, because nobody's going out there and doing land clearing and hinge cutting and planting food plots and all of that and investing all the sweat, the blood, the money just to take, right? They're giving back. We haven't seen that before. Mm-hmm. There's a real change in hunting culture that's taking place, and we're cognizant of the decisions that we make behind the release or behind the trigger, what that's going to do. And we want there to be a bright, vibrant, robust future for this resource for generations to come. And I think there's a very clear dividing line there based on an age demographic.
Yeah, it feels to me from just the comments that we've received on things that we've posted, and like that line that you're talking about, that divide feels very real, and it feels like it's, I don't know if this is simplifying it too much, but it feels like there's this protection of tradition, as well as maybe the misnomer that the younger generation is only focused on trophy potential and not conservation, right? And
right.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I've had to figure out how to respond to, I guess, is that, I am the guy that is trying to figure out how to improve my property. But it isn't just, so that I can have a new opportunity to shoot $2 every year, because I'm also the guy that thinks we would benefit massively from going to a $1 rule. And so I think, figuring out how to respond to that, to understand that we are focused on the health of the deer herd and improving the buck to doe ratio, and like you said, biology and conservation focused, like that to me feels like one of the big challenges and misconceptions that each side has of the other, and the other side being tradition, and this is how it always is and how it's always been.
I'll add to that, and I'll just put this out there, and it is what it is. It's been my experience. It's my opinion. It might be popular. It might not. My father's generation, okay, so guys that are 65 plus,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like they ever had a succession plan. Like a lot of these older gentlemen that are presidents and vice presidents and board members and all this kind of stuff on umpteen clubs and organizations, they've been there for 2 to 3 decades. And their organizations are all dying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You go to these events and everybody in the room but you has gray hair. Well, why is that? It's not because the younger generation doesn't love deer hunting or doesn't care, right? So you start diving into why is that? It's because they didn't teach and they didn't empower the younger generation, in my opinion, the way they should have to assume leadership when it was their time. It's nature's way that eventually every young lion becomes an old lion. We all run out of time. And, if there's one thing that I'm on a mission to do, it's to share as much knowledge and as much information, as much wisdom as I had to offer to the next guy. Because I don't ever want to walk into a room again and see a 20-year age gap. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. We got to lift each other up. We got to educate each other. Iron sharpens iron. And I don't think it functioned very well that way for a long time. And it was largely due to, you used the word, tradition.
Mm-hmm.
New ideas weren't welcome. This is the way we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way we're always going to do it. And you start presenting science and data and facts, and they get angry. Not all, but many. Because I think, part of our father's generation, right, and not all of them, but you don't say you're wrong, right? You sink your teeth into it and you hold on to it. You're not going to come back and say I was wrong. I think there's a lot of pride that comes in that old generation. And I think that's why we've struggled as a hunting fraternity, is because of pride and because there wasn't a succession plan. And I think that the new generation that's coming on right now, man, we share everything. We talk about our failures. We laugh about our mistakes. Hey, what are you doing to improve your property? Like, I've been trying this and it's just not working. Like, there's no pride.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting back to that sense of brotherhood, that camaraderie, that unapologetic laughter that just erupts in a conversation when somebody tells a story about something dumb they did and blew a hunt, right? And we don't laugh because we're mocking them. We laugh because we've been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different dynamic. It's a different culture, and it's time for change. We're turning that corner culturally in the state of Michigan. And I think the things that are before us and before the Natural Resources Commission here this spring are reflective of that change. The one buck rule, the antlerless DMU quota system, some of the discussions that have been had tertiary to that about pushing firearms away from the peak rut. These are things that would have lit people's hair on fire 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was what I was actually going to kind of circle back to now. So when we were talking about the deer advisory team, I think you called it. So, and we got into kind of the first recommendation there of going to a one buck rule, but is there sort of a list of formal recommendations that the deer advisory team has presented? And if so, for the listener, like, could you kind of speak on what is before the commission this year in terms of formal recommendations?
Sure. So the big one is the recommendation to go to a one buck system statewide. And that was a recommendation that was made jointly between the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula teams. And that is something that has not happened in the 3 years that I've been a part of these things. Usually each peninsula will bring peninsula-specific recommendations. So it was incredible to see the unity across the state of Michigan to make that move to the $1 system. And just for conversation's sake, our voting metrics, the way they're built, a recommendation has to achieve a 60% approval rate to pass, to become a recommendation. And the reason that we arrived at 60% was because we felt a 51% simple majority simply isn't very cohesive. And, deer are a passionate subject. So we didn't want to go to 66% super majority because it's tough to get people to agree on things sometimes. Mm-hmm. So we thought that a 60% number was a good happy medium. But when we voted the $1 recommendation through, we came out with a 74% approval rating across both teams.
74%.
Yes, sir.
Holy smokes.
So it was incredible to see that many people across two peninsulas with different backgrounds, different ideas, different upbringings, different hunting styles, all come to the table and say, yeah, above and beyond supermajority, we feel strongly that this is a good thing to do. That really spoke to me.
Yeah, that's speaking to me right now. 74% across both teams, Upper and Lower Peninsula, and that's wow. That shocks me a little.
So the way that the recommendation was written was for the combo tag to be good for 2 deer, only one of which could be a buck. Mm-hmm. And we wanted all the regional antlerless restrictions to remain in place. So, for example, up here in the high snowfall zone of the UP, you can only take antlerless deer with archery gear. That would remain. Areas where you can take them with a rifle, that would likewise remain. And we were, at that point, under the impression that there was the ability to eliminate the single tag. So that was the recommendation. It turned out, after some wrangling, if you will, with the Attorney General's office, that you cannot legally suspend the issuance of the single tag. So some of the discussion that's being had at this point in time with the department and the commission is how to make the $1 system workable, keeping the $1 tag in play. So, some commissioners would be more interested in applying an APR. Some would like to see it unrestricted. There's different feelings on both sides of the fence. Myself, just personally, as long as we get some variation of the $1 system across the finish line, I think that is a massive step forward. And if it has an APR on it, I'm okay with that.
So just to be clear, you're talking about the single buck tag. Like if you go down to the store and you're going to buy a hunting license, not the combo tag, but like just a buck tag. That's what you're talking about.
The combo tag, as we proposed it, would be $1 unrestricted plus a doe.
Correct.
And then the single tag would have been eliminated. But we're unable to do that. So the single tag will remain.
Yeah.
Now, what isn't determined at this point, and the DNR and the commission are working through this together, is how they're going to structure that. Is there going to be APRs? If so, how many? How many points? Are they going to leave the buck on the combo tag unrestricted and apply an APR to the single tag? We don't know those things, at least not yet. But that's active conversation being had with the NRC and the DNR. And, I'm just of the opinion that no matter how that comes through, whether it has an APR or it doesn't, I think just making the transition to a $1 system will have positive impact.
So yes. So is it being received on the committees in the commission's end that Okay, 75% or whatever, 70-some percent, 74, did you say?
74, yes, sir.
So is it penetrating?
Is it landing for them? Yeah.
Is it hitting their head? Like, are they getting like, hey, this $1 thing is like, we want it. The people want it.
They are. Obviously our recommendation spoke loudly, but I'll tell you this, and this goes back to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. Really what is rocking the commission's world right now is the level of public engagement. I spoke to a commissioner here the end of last week who told me that they had received in excess of 1,000 emails from Michigan deer hunters last week alone. The public is definitely speaking up and making their wishes known. And the commissioner that I talked to said that in his estimation, for every 100 emails that were supporting the $1 system, there was one opposed.
That's how my conversations have been.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for every 10, there's one that doesn't like it, and it seems to be. And I'm sorry if this comes off as to the people listening that may be the one, but
yeah,
it seems like the reasoning for keeping the $2 is it's very selfish. It's a very, what can I get out of the resource, not what can I give back. That's what it feels like to me. It's like, well, I like killing 2 deer. I like killing bucks. I'm right there. I love killing bucks, but like to what extent? Right? And
at what cost? Yeah.
At what cost? That's what I was trying to say. At what cost? That's the big one, right? The $2, that's the big one.
The big recommendation, yeah.
Let's continue with some of the recommendations,
sure.
and regulatory stuff. So let's come back to $1 and let's drill down on the particulars with that.
Sure.
Okay.
So that was the singular recommendation that came out of the Upper Peninsula et al. This year. The Lower Peninsula team did also work on a recommendation to restore muzzleloader season. So currently you have what you guys call second gun. And there was some appetite from the Lower Peninsula team to roll that back and to make it muzzleloader season once again. So that's in the stack of things for the commission to consider. I don't have a feel for how they're leaning on that right now, but that was a recommendation that they did bring. Another one is there was a proposal from Rochelle Hubbard, and she did just a fantastic job with all the behind-the-scenes work on this for an antlerless DMU quota system. So, currently you can buy 10 over-the-counter antlerless tags, go wherever you want and fill them. And something that we began to recognize and talked early on in our discussion today about this is the nuance and the variation and the diversity around the state of Michigan, even county to county sometimes.
Yes.
And over here, it might be fine to shoot 80 does, and over here, maybe 2. And we felt the need to be able to get more granular with our approach to antlerless management and to tailor it to the needs of geographic areas. Obviously, antlerless harvest governs population, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be cautious with that. You want to be responsible with that. You don't want to over-harvest. And certainly there's areas that are on the total other end of the spectrum. They're just overrun. But we didn't feel there was any mechanism in place through the department to really delineate that and to specifically manage on a geographic basis. More micromanagement, I guess, would be the right term. So that was a proposal that was brought to the table. Rochelle did a great job presenting it. The DNR is currently working through that. I know they're making some adjustments and tailoring it to a way they think is going to work better. But that is an active discussion between the department and the commission. I know the commission is really excited about that. So that would be another exciting potential add to the 26 reg cycle there. Outside of that, there were no other official recommendations, but there was some discussion around the idea of potentially reducing the length of rifle season and also moving the starting date. And that never went to any kind of a vote. It didn't come to fruition with a final recommendation. We just simply ran out of time. But the idea tossed around was pushing the opener back to the Saturday before Thanksgiving, running a total of 9 days, which would still give people 2 weekends every single year to get out and to rifle hunt. But the biggest point there was when we looked at other states, and I'll just use Ohio as an example. They've got a very short rifle season. It's like 5 days.
Yeah.
And it's also not on the peak rut. And if you're talking about trying to graduate bucks to older age classes, and then you look at the harvest stats in Michigan, it's like 51% of total annual harvest happens the first 2 days of rifle season.
That's right.
It's a slaughter.
It really is. Yeah, I think people know that. I think people, they hear the Orange Army. I think that resonates.
Obviously you're up against it, right? November 15th is like Christmas in the state of Michigan. I mean, the pitchforks and Molotov cocktails are coming out when you touch November 15th.
Yeah.
But I think that it is a biologically fair discussion to engage in. Like, is what we're doing the best thing for the resource? And if it is, well, how do we justify it? What data stream do we have? What science do we have? Because when we look at what everyone else is doing who is successful, more so than we are, they're not doing it the way we're doing it.
That's right.
And I think that says something.
We ranted about this, Jordan, and I'm about to slightly rant just a minute here, but I am so for any meaningful change. And what I mean specifically is if you look at the last decade, and you know this better than I do, so please feel free to chime in after I go in here, but all the changes that the state of Michigan has made in the last decade, maybe there's one example that this isn't the case, but it's all these small, minor changes and tweaks that don't have significant change involved with it. There's no significant, it doesn't really make an effect on what we're trying to accomplish. It's just change for the sake of change. It feels that way a lot of the times. It feels like it's just change to check a box. It feels like it's not meaningful. And so I'm for meaningful change. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. And we're talking about wildlife here. Like if it didn't change, something would be wrong. Like if we didn't have things constantly ebbing and flowing and, certain impacts, like it wouldn't be normal. Like there has to be change. It's like almost like for wildlife, if there wasn't a constant flow and ebb and how we're making decisions on managing the wildlife, it can't be the same year in and year out.
And you said it too, Nate, like if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that's
where the generation thing comes in too, but it's like there's got to be some meaningful change. If you don't even test the waters, you'll never know.
Yeah, so Jordan, my data and analytical brain though now says, it feels like you don't want to change too much and certainly not too many drastic things all in 1 year, because then how do you know what worked? Like it feels like make a big change and measure it and assess the success of the change. Like this, I feel as though this has to build.
Yeah. The other side of it though is like the commission's ready to do something. So
that's a good point too.
While the door's open,
you've got a commission that's listening.
Yeah. Like there's two sides to that.
So how do you think about that specifically, Jordan, in terms of like the, big change and being able to discern what worked and what didn't, and how do you measure that?
So on a scientific basis, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. You stated it perfectly. Whenever you're talking about biology, it's all cause and effect, right?
Sure.
Whatever, you begin with your hypothesis. Well, we're trying to address this problem, and we think if we do this, it will do this. The nature of good science is questioning what we think we know and then measuring the results against reality.
Yep.
And you don't do that with four things at once, right? In science, we have things called controls because you have to have absolutes to measure your data. And when you go into the engine room and you throw a whole bunch of switches and levers, how do you then circle back and attribute whatever change occurred to any one or even any two levers that you flipped? You can't. You don't know. So the shrewd thing to do scientifically is to make one major change, let it rest, let it ride for a little bit, measure the data, and then reevaluate. I agree with you scientifically on that. Now, politically, the commission that we have right now, probably the best one I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And when I say the best, how am I measuring that? By their willingness to change, their willingness to have honest, free-flowing dialogue and to potentially make hard decisions. I've not seen a commission like this. And there's a part of me that I'm also on that same side of the fence where in 2 years, the composition of this commission is not going to be the same.
Yeah.
And will the appetite for change be there in the future? Because past precedent is no.
Right.
Do we do as much as we can possibly get done now? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you, Michigan hunters have been very slow to change historically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you do run the risk if you do too much too fast of upsetting the apple cart and making too many people angry. And I'm not saying that we should manage our wildlife based on the whims and wants of the Michigan hunter. I absolutely don't feel that way. You put the resource first and we can deal with it. But that being said, there is an element of, as they say, social science at play in this case.
Sure.
To your, again, maybe this is going into the weeds, but I think that's what podcasts are for, and we're on the topic, so I'm gonna ask you, money, right? Money is Devin, you've been saying this, like, you can't, like, the Department of Natural Resource is supposed to manage
The natural resource.
So when money comes into play, like, if you're making decisions based on what brings in the most cash, that's not necessarily the best thing. On the same token, though, to your point, in the Upper Peninsula right now, you need money to manage
The resource.
So it's like this.
Yeah.
It's like this tongue-in-cheek thing, but the combo tag, obviously, like, you pull up to Burger King and you get what's their burger down there?
Whopper.
The Whopper Junior. Everybody goes to Burger King for the Whopper.
Yeah.
That's like the number one on the menu. Same thing with the combo tag for Michigan DNR. That's the cash cow.
That's the special. Yeah.
Give me the Whopper Junior with fry and a side of Coke.
Give
there.
me the combo tag.
The combo tag, right? That's the moneymaker. And so, how do you feel? Here's the question, Jordan. You got to have money to manage properly, but you also don't want to manage based on bringing in the most money. How do you look at that? Like, how do you
net those out?
All right, this is going to be a good one. I love the question. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to answer your question with a question, and then I'm going to dive in. Are they the Department of Natural Resources, or are they the Department of the Treasury? Now, you're absolutely right. It takes money to manage these resources. But let's look at some of the data, the cold hard facts. We've lost 1/3 of our hunters in the state of Michigan since 2000. You want to talk about license sales dropping off? Let's take a long, hard look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we had the baby boomers that are aging out, right? Like, that's part of that equation if we're going to be fair about it. But also, another inconvenient truth is we're losing hunters to surrounding states.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
So why is that? Well, let's use the restaurant analogy, right? You guys have been to a major city where there's food trucks, lined up down the side of the road once or twice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a Korean barbecue joint. You've got foot-long Coney dogs. You've got, Thai food. You've got cheeseburgers. You got everything you could ever want, right? And then here's this one rough-looking fifth wheel thing with some fat guy in the window, and he's like, "Hey man, yeah, we got plain burgers over here. Get you a plain burger." How many plain burgers you think that dude's selling? Not many.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody else is close, they're accessible, and they're providing a better product that's more desirable. So people are buying fajitas. People are buying Korean barbecue. You're buying fried chicken, whatever. They don't want your plain burger. It's that simple. The consumer drives the market. That's the bottom line. And let's just talk about Deere as if Deere are a business, because to the state of Michigan, to some extent, they are.
Mm-hmm.
If you want people to buy your product, and they're not, you have to assess why. And this is where, the guys that are like, the $1 guys are trophy hunters are going to get all wound up.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be very honest. How many guys do you know that get out of bed October 1st at 4 o'clock in the morning, or November 15th at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they wake up and they go, man, I can't wait for that spike horn to show up at 8:30.
It's true.
I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone. And I don't care if you're a diehard backcountry hunter or if you're a recreational guy that hunts, 5 to 7 days a year. You want to kill a big buck.
Yeah.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, let's not disparage that, right? There's nothing wrong with dreaming about killing a monster buck. We all do. We have since we were little boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not wrong. And in the food truck sense, right, it's not wrong to want Korean barbecue. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're Michigan, your license sales are tanking, hunters are going to surrounding states, and you just keep slinging plain burgers.
Yep.
How long does it make business sense to do that before you start thinking, well, maybe we should at least put cheese on the burger, offer some ketchup and mustard? We've really been behind the curve on it. And the fear has always been upsetting tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan is one of the richest states in the Midwest with how long-standing our hunting tradition has been. It is always about tradition, tradition, tradition. Everywhere you turn in the state of Michigan. But you know what? Not all traditions are good. Women didn't always have the opportunity to vote. Not a good tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Point to any number of things. We changed over time. We adapted. Michigan has been very slow to change. Now, in a business sense, if you want to make more money, you've got to provide a better product than the next guy. That's the bottom line. You guys are in business. You get it, right? If you're putting some piece of crap out there,
mm-hmm.
people are going to go to the next company. They're going to say, oh, man, that painted arrow stuff was just straight garbage. It wasn't durable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it. It didn't fit my equipment. Nah, I'm going to go with these guys over here. But if you produce a quality product that's got good fit, that's got good finish, you provide customer service, you're going to have returning customers for a long time.
That's right.
But it's about putting a quality product on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I look at Michigan deer hunting, I measure herd health by 3 primary metrics. And I'm not a biologist, okay? I put my boots on the same way you do. But I'm looking at, first of all, buck to doe ratio. You should have as balanced of a ratio as you can. Number 2, I'm looking at diversity and age structure. Most of our bucks in the state of Michigan do not see their 3rd birthday. That's a problem. Most of our herd in the state of Michigan is out of balance, buck to doe ratio wise. Why? Because we don't shoot does. 80% of Michigan hunters in 2025 did not harvest a single doe. 80% of Michigan hunters. That's a problem. Number 3, are we within carrying capacity of the land? Many places in Michigan, the answer is no. So we get a fat failing grade in the 3 basic herd health metrics. And then when you look to neighboring states, they don't have those problems.
It's
So to me, that sets the table for necessitating change. What we're doing is not working. The product we're producing is not desirable and people are going elsewhere. So if you want to repatriate hunters you've lost, put a quality product on the table. If you want to recruit more new hunters, put a quality product on the table. It's that simple.
Oh, man. Jordan, I really like the way that you just put all that. The thing that we've been fortunate, there's actually a video that we're going to be putting out soon on our YouTube channel, like a full documentary hunt of a collaboration we did with some guys out of Ohio. Whitetail Edge. Many of you guys might know that name. We've been fortunate to hunt other states. I can assure you, we are not leaving the state of Michigan. I think that's pretty clear in our content that we put out. Like, we love hunting our home state, but it is so obvious when you go and hunt Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, Iowa. It is so obvious that the buck to doe ratio and the quality of the product is, like you're saying, the quality is there, and it's a night and day hunt. Like, it shines so bright when you hunt some of these other places that have a quote unquote healthy quality product. And it shines so bright when you come back home and hunt the next day. And it's, again, you and I were talking about this, Jordan, a few days ago before we even got on this podcast, but you said it, and I've heard it said a lot, and I think I want to try and make a t-shirt or something around it because I like it so much. We're not the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan is not trying to become Iowa. Mm-hmm. We're trying to become the best and the better product quality Michigan that we have. We're not trying to become something that we're not. We're trying to become better within our own
the best
rights.
Michigan we can be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. I want to just take a second here and pause, because the guys that think one buck is all about trophies, they're feeling really validated right now at this point in the podcast. See, they're talking about big bucks. That's all they're talking about, big bucks. Here's the thing. In a healthy, balanced herd that falls within carrying capacity of the land, big bucks are a naturally occurring byproduct of a healthy herd. We're not managing for big bucks. We're managing for herd health. And if we do that properly, the end result benefits the hunter. It's that simple.
Jordan Hoover for governor.
Yeah, big bucks aren't the goal. They're the byproduct of achieving the goal.
100%.
I do think we overcomplicate it sometimes. I really do.
Let's drill down on that if you want to. You want to get in the weeds on the particulars of one buck and why it works?
Please.
Yeah, please hit me over the head with it.
So one of the things that opponents of one buck say right off the top all the time, and I read it on Facebook on a daily basis. Well, these guys they're out of their minds. I mean, only 5% of Michigan hunters are taking a second buck. So why would you restrict people? What does 5% matter? Well, it isn't about the front end savings, but let's talk about that for just a second. People that are familiar with investments, you usually go one of two routes. Either you play high risk stocks and it's a boom bust game, which is volatile and unpredictable, or you play it safer. Maybe you do something like a long-term certificate of deposit that's got a 5% interest. Well, if you put $100,000 into a 5% interest certificate of deposit for a decade, 10 years later, that's a lot of money you made. Year one, are you going to make much? No, it might seem insignificant to you, but it's the cumulative effect over time. If you were able to put $30,000 back onto the landscape on an annual basis, what does that look like in 10 years?
The extrapolation, yeah.
It's an incredible increase. It's not to be underestimated simply because it's a low percentage initially. But the primary concern with one buck isn't necessarily saving bucks. It's the psychological impact on the hunter, and it's the decision-making process behind the release and behind the trigger.
Yep.
It's about how you use the first tag. Now, we'll just set the scene. It's October 18th. You get this basket rack 6-point that walks through, perfect broadside shot, 20 yards, and you got one buck tag in your pocket. I'm going to bet you're not going to shoot that buck. Maybe some guys will. And you know what? I'm here to tell you, if that's your choice and that buck makes your heart happy, I've got nothing but congratulations to say to you. Period. Good for you, brother. But I think there's a lot of guys, if they have one tag, that year-and-a-half-old 6 is going to walk on by. And the next guy is probably going to make the same choice. That buck likely survives. Not a guarantee, but a much higher likelihood. Now, if I had 2 tags in my pocket, tradition, air quotes, I'm going to shoot that buck.
You got your meat buck. That's your meat.
It's your freezer buck.
Yeah. I got my buck. Now I'm going to wait for a good one.
I mean, you hear that all too often. If you're listening to this and you've never heard that,
Yeah.
don't lie to yourself. Don't even lie to yourself. If you're listening and you're from Michigan, you've never heard, oh, I got my freezer buck and now I'm going to go trophy hunting.
And I can hunt for horns.
Don't lie to yourself right now. Everybody's heard that. It's the truth.
So it's the psychological influence that I think begins to matter. The hunters are going to think about their harvest choices. You know, let's roll it back. Let's say it's October 5th. It is even less likely because it's so early. Do I want my hunting season to end now? Nope. No, I don't.
No, you don't.
I love bucks, and there's bigger bucks out there. I'm going to wait. I think that psychological influence and the resulting statistical gains from the bucks that survive that is potentially immeasurable. And, you know, that's where the department and the commission might struggle a little bit, because that is something that is it's an immeasurable.
Yeah.
It's an intangible, right? You can't predict the psychology of the hunter and the harvest choices they're going to make. But I believe that we can help guide it in a positive direction. And I think that one buck does that really well. It's not taking away your choice. It's empowering you to make a better one.
That's a T-shirt or something there.
Yeah, I was just, before you said immeasurable, I was going to say it's so difficult to measure that. You can't, you know, you can measure the number of second bucks that were taken, like you started that point with. But what you can't measure is how many bucks would not have been taken if they only had the one buck tag in their pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other portion of this that I want to talk about is the importance of having that designated antlerless tag in your pocket day one. One buck, one doe. 80% of Michigan hunters last year didn't shoot a doe. That's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not healthy at all. And that should show you how absolutely buck-centric we are. It is buck, 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 buck. Antlers drive the hunt. But going back to earlier discussion, we have a stewardship duty. We have an obligation. And part of that, you know, it's called deer management. It's not called buck management. That means we have to do our part and harvest the appropriate number of antlerless deer in our areas to help maintain a healthy herd. Now, there's some guys that will say, you're going to make me pay for a doe tag, and I don't want one. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Years ago, the base license became a mandatory purchase. You couldn't even buy a deer tag unless you bought the base license. And I admit it, I was one of those guys. I was madder than hell. Like, you're going to make me buy this product I don't want to buy, and you won't let me buy a deer tag unless I do. This is terrible. This is, you know, tyrannical DNR, right?
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't a big small game hunter. I'm a deer junkie, and that's my focus in the fall. I wasn't investing really any time in squirrel hunting or rabbit hunting or bird hunting. I did when I was younger. So here's what happened. My boy looks at me and says, "Dad, let's go squirrel hunting." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a beautiful afternoon. Yeah, grab the 22s. Let's go." I had to buy the base license. I already paid for it. I may as well get my money out of it. So guess what we started doing? Squirrel hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it. We have a good time. And I think the same thing will happen with that doe tag in people's pocket in the field. They're going to gripe. They're going to complain. And at some point, that big nanny doe is going to stop broadside in front of them, and my words are going to echo in their head. I paid for it. I may as well use it. And if we get even a small percentage nudge in the right direction because of that in antlerless harvest, that is a massive gain, whether you're in the UP or the LP. We need to take does.
Yeah, call it a 5% like year one. 5% increase in doe harvest year one. That's significant. That's not nothing. And then maybe that grows year two.
Well, yeah, but you just set the scene beautifully. So that guy's in his tree stand. It's October 18th, and he's sitting there, and this buck's walking by that he probably would have shot if he had 2 buck tags, but he's sitting there. He's maybe a little sour because this is year one, and he's only got 1 buck tag, and so he's letting that buck walk by because deep down he's telling himself, yeah, I probably do want to shoot a little bit bigger of one. I've only got 1 buck tag. Well, maybe 20 minutes later, that big nanny doe on October 18th, or maybe it's October 7th, whatever you call it, she walks by a little later. And at the same time, he's sitting there and he's sulking that he had to let that buck go. But, hey, I've got this doe tag and she's right there, and why not? I paid for it.
Statistically, the harvest data shows us that the average hunter wants 2 deer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can only take 1 buck and you doe tag in your pocket, we know the second one automatically has to be antlerless.
Yeah.
And I think that could be a really big and important gain.
Yeah, I agree.
I am getting beat at by my phone here. I am actually running out of battery on the sucker. So we are going to have to expedite the process here and cover the things you want to.
So
I think we're doing well.
I think we're doing well on what we wanted to cover. Here's a big thing for me. I've had numbers of over 8 people that have reached out to us on social media, and say, hey, I can't be there on April 8th. I can't be there in May. How do I let my voice be heard? How do I actually make a significant impact? Can you tell people how to properly
make their voice heard?
Make their voice heard and contact people, email, like what in your mind is the best way to have significant impact if you cannot be there in person
on April
8th? Sure. So the first thing is you can get directly to the NRC commissioners through their email at nrc@michigan.gov. And they do read them. Don't think they don't. So that is your best, most effective means of communication with them. Also, if you get on the DNR website under boards and committees, Natural Resources Commission, some of the commissioners have phone numbers that are available. John Walters, I'll spotlight him. He has been fantastic for calling people back and engaging with the public. That is definitely a person that you could likely connect with without much trouble at all. But that is the simplest, most straightforward, easy way, for people that want more information, on the work of the DAT and things like that, or they have questions, they can feel free to contact me. My number here is 906-524-2258. And I guess, just to kind of wrap this all up, I just want to encourage our listeners that we're living in an incredible moment in Michigan hunting history right now. And the stage is set for Michigan's comeback story this spring. The April and the May NRC Commission meetings are truly going to be something special. And I'm hearing preliminarily they're anticipating we're going to shatter the attendance records. Expect good things and get involved where you can and stay committed.
Can you rattle off the email one more time? NRC at
nrc@michigan.gov.
It's at NRC at Michigan.gov. You heard it here first. Hey, Jordan, you're a winner, man. I really appreciate your
commitment, your
involvement,
perspective, your involvement, all of it.
Just, I love the way that you speak. It's very practical, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing and coming on here, especially. We appreciate that more than you know.
Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate you both. I'm glad that you're getting involved, and I will look forward to seeing you April 8th.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it, Jordan.
Can't wait. God bless you, man.
Thanks, guys.
We'll be in touch. Wow. I mean, just to quickly wrap this up, I can't even feel like I'm excited. There's a level of excitement. Are you with me?
Yeah, I mean, I had goosebumps several times throughout the podcast, I think. Like you said, he's very practical. He articulated things beautifully. And I think, the reality is the time is now. And I think, he also did a good job of sort of laying out the perspective and the potential,
the opposition's
perspective of these initiatives, and sort of did a beautiful job of kind of busting those or offering a different viewpoint. And I'm encouraged. If you're listening and you're encouraged, you heard how to get involved. Send an email, make a phone call. The NRC, nrc@michigan.gov. That's
the bread and butter.
Fire it off. Just get on the horn with.
It doesn't have to be extravagant. Hey, here's who I am. Here's where I live, and
I'm in
this
support
is what
of.
I'm. Yeah. This is what I want to see.
Very simple. So it's a data point, and it keeps the momentum and the ball rolling, which is what's important. And I think, at the end of the day, his mission and his involvement being sort of predicated on his family's background and sort of the duty that he feels as a father with his boys, I couldn't resonate with that more for, my own upbringing and my boys at home. And I'm encouraged and excited, and NRC@michigan.gov.
See you later.
See you.